Good afternoon and welcome to Future Ready. My name is Miriam Coffie. I'm a workforce supply lead for the NHS East of England, the Workforce Training and Education Directorate, and I'm joined by my colleague James Cross, also a workforce supply lead. We have other guests today on the webinar, but just to say that this is the fourth in our series of Future Ready, which is a bite-sized webinar series designed to support newly qualifying healthcare learners to transition confidently into employment. All of these webinars are recorded and are stored on the East of England Multi-Professional Learner app. So hopefully you have already got access to the app. Lots of useful tools on there, lots of electronic copies of this presentation and lots of resources on there to support you. So, as I said, today is the fourth in the series of Future Ready, and we're focusing today on CV writing, applications and personal statements. I'm joined today by Jon Lee from the NHS Business Services Authority, who is the Stakeholder Engagement Lead for NHS Jobs, and also by Cate Morgan, Senior Clinical Lead for NHS England, East of England, Workforce Training and Education. In terms of our agenda, we'll be going through actually what should your CV look like. Jon will then take us through a section around applications, and Cate will then support us around what does a good personal statement look like. And there'll be some room and questions at the end if you have any. So I'm now going to hand over to James. James, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Miriam, and good afternoon, everyone. So, plan for this part of the session is really kind of fourfold, really. So, understanding the purpose and structure of a CV, and learning the key principles that effectively underpin good CV writing. Some key tips for making applications. How to showcase yourself via a personal statement, and then finally identifying some common mistakes to avoid. And speaking for, I suspect, most of us, as if not all of us as presenters, I think we've all made many mistakes along the road with this sort of thing, and learnt as we've been going along. Next slide, please, Miriam. Thank you very much. So, what is a CV and why is it important? So, I think probably colleagues are relatively familiar with this, but a CV is a concise, tailored document, and we'll talk more about the specifics in just a moment. But its primary purpose, I suppose, is to highlight an individual's skills and experience and also achievements as well. Critical but possibly slightly depressing point is the 7-second rule, and it is very true as a recruiter. If you think when recruiters are recruiting to any role, really, they will have multiple CVs, multiple application forms to look through depending on the role. And on average, you have 7 seconds to make a lasting impression on that recruiter. So critically, making sure your CVs, applications are well presented is, of course, really, really important. But also understanding what that particular recruiter is looking for in terms of the particular role that you are using your CV for really does give you an advantage and will make sure you tailor your CV to sparking that interest within 7 seconds. Next slide, please, Mary. So, what's in a CV? And we're going to go into a little bit more detail on this slide, just through I guess the essential sections that you should really have in terms of your CV and the sorts of things you should be reflecting back within these sections. So we're going to start right at the top in terms of personal details. Probably pretty straightforward, this section, in terms of name, contact details, etc., etc. However, what you probably should bear in mind is it's probably not appropriate to include really any kind of characteristics that potentially are ultimately not relevant in terms of a recruitment situation. So thinking particularly about, for example, you shouldn't necessarily put your date of birth on a CV, you shouldn't put your nationality on a CV, you shouldn't include photos, things like that, things that are potentially kind of personally identifiable. Obviously, you just want to focus on the professional elements within your CV. Moving around the circle, we next go on to the personal profile, and this is a really critical part of any CV. And just going back to that point I made a few moments ago around this kind of notion of the 7-second rule, this is, I would argue, particularly where your personal profile comes in, because you've probably got about 3 lines or so in bold right at the top of your CV under your sort of name and kind of key contact details to really highlight what makes you, and critically what will make you really the candidate to employ for that particular role that you are looking to apply for. So the personal profile is really, really important. So, for example, Miriam has already told you what Miriam and I do kind of in our day jobs. If we did a personal statement, we would say something along the lines of, currently working for NHS England, leading on workforce supply in terms of looking to recruit the very best workforce for the East of England, or something along those lines, something short, snappy, that highlights why you are you and why you should be considered for this particular post, and obviously tailoring it as we mentioned. Education and qualifications are clearly a really, really important part of the CV. It very much is, as it says there, chronologically with the most recent first. You just need to highlight all of your key education and qualifications and just make that really, really clear to anybody that is reading your CV. Similarly, if we move on to the next section around employment/placement experience, similarly chronological, so starting with the most recent first, highlighting essentially the role you've been in or where you've been on placement, the employer, and also the date. But also under this section, what is really, really important is you do need to be highlighting some of the things you've done and some of the things that you've achieved within that particular placement, ideally using the kind of STAR methodology, which we're going to touch on a little bit later on in this discussion, and I believe we've touched on in previous discussions, but really focusing on, in particular, the actions that you've led on and the results that you achieved. Moving on to skills, again, another really, really important part of the CV, and this can be really helpful as well when you are thinking about tailoring your personal profile that we spoke about earlier. You may potentially, depending on how many skills you wanted to highlight, you may potentially want to kind of categorize these. It very much is an individual choice, but certainly skills are a very useful and relevant thing to highlight on any CV. In addition, sort of training certifications again is something else that potentially you could highlight. What I would say is, though, you've probably realistically got a maximum of 2 pages, so don't go overboard. So, for example, and I'm being slightly cheeky here, but I was very proud when I got first, excuse me, in a race when I was running at school. I probably wouldn't be including that on my CV, to be perfectly honest, to be using a very obvious example. So really highlight stuff that's relevant. So, for example, if you're applying for perhaps clinical roles, you might want to highlight things such as mandatory training, sort of health and safety training that you've undergone that would be directly relevant to the position that you're looking to apply for with this particular CV. You may also want to highlight your interests and achievements, particularly the achievements. I would potentially be tempted to say with this particular section to be quite careful, because you should probably only really be highlighting things that are directly relevant to the positions that you are looking to apply for. So by all means include interests and achievements, but I would say just use a degree of care, and I would potentially say focus really on the other areas with I guess the space limits that you've got. And then the final area is references. So again, probably a few kind of do's and don'ts with references with regard to CVs. What I would be tempted to say probably would be references available on request, rather than highlighting any specific referees that you would like to use. Just kind of highlight that you're aware that references might be approached, and you'd be obviously very supportive of people doing that, and you could support them with approaching a number of referees on your behalf. Miriam, I think I'm handing back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. Really important, I think, going through the sections of a CV. And again, as you said, we will be focusing on kind of the STAR in terms of structuring things around applications and personal statements, and even interviews later on. So just really picking up on what James was saying there around a personal profile, those 3 lines, if you like, that should be at the top of your CV. And your personal profile should absolutely reflect where you are now, not where you're going to be in 10 years' time. So, for example, if you're a nursing student, you might say, I'm a final year nursing student with placement experience across acute and community settings. I developed strong communication, prioritisation and teamwork skills, and I'm committed to delivering safe, person-centred care aligned to the NHS values. I'm reflective, keen to learn and motivated to continue developing my confidence as a newly qualified practitioner. Here you are saying who you are, what it is that you can bring to a role, but also what your ambitions and motivations are. So really 3 key pertinent points. So again, thinking about that employment and placement experience, focusing on the STAR, absolutely use the STAR techniques to organise your experiences. If you're thinking about your examples for a specific role, you absolutely have to look at tailoring them to highlight your strengths against the key areas of the job. So, for example, as opposed to I provided antenatal care in the community, absolutely relevant thing for a student midwife to say. You need to think about how you phrase this. It might be better to say, I supported community antenatal care for women with additional needs, using empathetic communication to encourage engagement and attendance. That actually says so much more than I provided antenatal care. One thing that you do need to be aware of is the applicant tracker system. Most recruiters use something called ATS software to filter CVs before they even see a single word. If your CV doesn't contain the right keywords, it might get automatically rejected. So really think about how your CV aligns to what it is that you can see within the job advert. So scan that job description for repeated terms, such as effective prioritisation or evidence-based interventions or caseload management, and then use those keywords quite naturally in your achievements rather than listing them without content. So what James was saying there about kind of your skills and your achievements, think about how you match those with those keywords. For example, a recent Band 5 dietitian job description frequently mentions dietetic support. So you may say, I've provided dietetic support to patients on placement, but actually the job description is looking for more. You could be saying something like, I managed a supervised patient caseload within inpatient wards, delivering evidence-based nutritional assessment and dietetic interventions using anthropometric and biochemical data as part of the multidisciplinary team. There, you're not saying anything that's not true, but you're enhancing actually what it is you've done as a student, and you're bringing in the fact that you've worked within a multidisciplinary care team. Back to you, James.
Brilliant, thank you, Miriam. And just to say, actually, I think just a general point for me with all of this. Firstly, even for, I guess, myself, relatively experienced of doing these sorts of things over a number of years, it's amazing how useful kind of little refreshers are as you go through, and just some things to kind of think about. And just in particular, I really liked your last example there, Miriam, actually, as well. And just particularly the way that that was phrased in terms of applying for clinical roles. I thought that was really, really good. So top tips for a CV. So we'll just kind of, I think, probably pick out several points from this particular slide, and as before, would urge colleagues watching this back just to pause the slide, just look through the various points and just reflect on it really, because there are some really, really good points here. So I think in particular, and I'm hoping that we've kind of got this message across, CVs do have to be concise. They do have to be specific to the role. So you could have a generic CV and then potentially just tailor it slightly for each individual role that you are applying for. Also absolutely critical is just making it really easy to read and accessible, particularly with the formatting, particularly with spelling and grammar. Make it look as though you've spent some time on it, because recruiters will pick that up really, really quickly. And I know it's a bit of a cliche, but there is nothing worse than a sloppy application form or a sloppy CV. It does genuinely get picked up on. With the best will in the world, I mean, nothing's ever perfect. You can take these things to the nth degree, but it is worth taking a degree of care over this. I think, as we've alluded to, but just picking it out again, that personal statement is going to be that thing that really gets you noticed at the start of that CV. So just spend some time really carefully crafting that, and absolutely don't be shy in terms of putting you in your best possible light. And I think the final point I'm just going to pick up here is, again, I think a really, really important point. Whenever you're going through any application or recruitment process, do really think about the language that you use and make sure it aligns with the NHS values. If you look on Trust website, for example, they will often highlight their values as a trust. It is well worth you as an individual just going through, and when you are applying for a job with a particular organisation, playing back some of those values, because actually they are meaningful to that organisation and the people that work there. So really important that you do that. Next slide, please, Miriam. And then the final point in terms of CVs is around producing an effective cover letter. So a cover letter, again, does have to be specific to the role that you are applying for. And certainly in most cases, when people are asking for your CV, they will ask for a covering letter as well. And it's fairly straightforward, but in relation to a covering letter, there are probably some critical points which we've reflected on the slide here, which I'm just going to spend a few moments going through. So obviously write it as a letter in terms of addressing it to the recruiter for the particular post. Write that compelling introduction. Again, just reflect back to that kind of 7-second rule that we spoke about earlier. Show recruiters that you understand what they are looking for and how you can best meet that need. So have that compelling introduction and almost use that as a golden thread in terms of your narrative throughout. How can you support the particular needs of the recruiter for this job? Because that is going to be the critical area that they're interested in. Show a genuine interest in the organisation and helping the organisation achieve its goals. And again, you can weave all sorts of points around this in terms of that covering letter that you produce. So for example, if an organisation is, I don't know, particularly challenged in a particular area, it may have, I don't know, made the news or whatever, that would be a prime opportunity, I would suggest, for you to highlight, actually, you've got some particular skills in a particular area that may be beneficial to an organisation that is challenged in a particular area. Absolutely be confident. You've got to sell yourself and focus on what you've learned, but critically, what you can offer that recruiter and what you can offer that job. Alignment with values we talked about in the last slide. Using your evidence to back up what you're saying. So if you are really good in a particular area and have got really strong skills in that area, just going back to that slide that Miriam shared just a couple of moments ago, just give a really concrete example of how you can evidence how you do that. So you're not sort of saying, oh yeah, I can do this and move on to the next point, but you're really, really thinking about and demonstrating how you can meet that particular criteria that they're looking for. Don't just repeat your CV or application. It's an opportunity, absolutely, to add some further context and motivation, but to really, again, make your CV stand out above the crowd. And then the final point is just around keeping it very clear and very focused. So in reality, you're probably looking at around about a page of typed A4, certainly not too much more. So it really is 3 to 4 paragraphs essentially once you've done the introduction to the letter to state why you're applying, what you're applying for, what you really understand about their organisation and why you want to apply for their organisation, and really highlight your enthusiasm for that particular role. Miriam, back to you.
Thanks, James. A fantastic introduction to CVs and effective cover letters. If you do want any more information about CVs, James and I have produced a CV template which will be available on the Healthcare Learner app for you to download and see actually what's the best way forward for you. We're now going to move on to Jon Lee, who's going to be talking about applications. Jon is the Stakeholder Engagement Lead from the NHS Services Business Authority here from NHS Jobs. So over to you, Jon.
Thanks, Miriam. And thanks, James. A really good insight there into the CVs and covering letters. Thank you again for the opportunity to come present during this Future Ready series. As Miriam said, my name's Jon Lee. I'm a Stakeholder Engagement Lead for the NHS Jobs system. NHS Jobs being that online platform you would use to search and apply for 350 different types of roles within the NHS. I'm going to take around 10-15 minutes or so to walk you through the application process. I just want to, before I start, I just want to make it absolutely clear that although we run the NHS Jobs system, we're not the recruiting organisation. So what I am sharing with you today is our interpretation of that process. And each organisation will have their own expectations around skills, etc. So treat this as a starting point and definitely not a definitive guide. The best advice from me and colleagues is always contact the hiring manager for the role you're applying for and ask specific questions you might have about the application and how that process works for their specific organisation. Okay, so in terms of the agenda, we'll have a look at the recruitment process, a quick look at transferable skills that I know you have covered during webinar 1 around designing your career vision. So if you missed that, I'm sure there'll be a link in the Learner app. We'll go through some tips and advice that you might find useful when completing your application form. I'll share some links to help and support within the NHS Jobs system. And I'll finish with an intro to the NHS Volunteering Service, which is a brand new platform that the NHS BSA have launched alongside NHS England. Okay, so the recruitment process itself will always begin with finding a role that matches your skills and experience. As you heard in the last webinar we did, you can do that via NHS Jobs. You might also see various vacancies via social media, LinkedIn, etc. But as I said, always use the contact information on the adverts to understand more about the role, expectations, application and interview format. When it comes to the application itself, read the job description and person specification first to make sure that role fits with your skills and experience. And when completing that support and information piece, always tailor that to the role you're applying for, because that's essentially what shortlisters will score you against. For that is to use the person specification criteria as headings in your supporting information. I know Cate will talk about this a bit later, but if I was completing an application, I would copy the headings into Microsoft Word and then list how I meet each part of that criteria, really trying to sell myself and highlight those transferable skills. When it comes to shortlisting, this is based only on the evidence in your application. You are anonymised at this stage, so hiring managers can't see any personal details, and that's done essentially to remove any potential bias from that stage. If you do declare you have a disability and you meet the essential criteria, you will be guaranteed an interview. It is also the policy in some organisations to offer the same if you are a member of the armed forces community. If you get invited to interview, this is usually competency based. May include some tasks or presentations, and with some organisations they might actually share the interview questions beforehand in advance to support candidates. The aim of the interview definitely isn't to catch you out, it's to help applicants to perform at their best. If you get through the interview and are made an offer, you then come to the pre-employment check stage, and this is the stage that usually takes a number of weeks to get through. This is where applicants will provide ID, right to work, proof of qualifications if it's required for specific roles, and generally 3 years worth of references. Again, if you're unsure of what evidence you need to provide, support is always available from the hiring organisation. Transferable skills. So these are abilities and knowledge that can be applied through various jobs, industries, and roles. The skills that can actually be technical skills, so your harder skills, or interpersonal skills, which are classed as softer skills. They're developed through a wide range of different experiences, might be past jobs, volunteering work you've been involved in, education, or life itself. These are, on this slide here, are just some examples of transferable skills. I'm sure the majority of you listening to this webinar will have at least one or two of these. And these skills can actually show that you can bring value to a role without having direct experience. And you can use these examples in a wide variety of different jobs and environments. And obviously that's why the class is being transferable. If we call out just a couple of these, so you've got research in there. So I'm sure a lot of you, as part of your degree course, will have had to do a lot of research. So think about some of those examples that you could provide in your application. There's also on there you've got quick learner, so you'll have had placements presumably where you'll have had to learn quickly on the job. So think about the skills you'll have used while doing that, and think about how you can get that down on paper in your application. These will be available afterwards to share, so you'll have access to these. And please keep in mind that the NHS actually values candidates who can apply existing knowledge to new challenges, and these transferable skills definitely demonstrate adaptability and versatility. Okay, so in terms of the applications itself, these are just some points for you to have a think about. So read and understand the job description fully before you make your application. You definitely don't need to meet 100% of the criteria to apply for the role. There's always room for development. If you're unsure about anything, again, ask the question. There should always be contact information next to a particular job role. Tailor your experience to meet the requirements of the role, and keep an eye on any deadlines. Don't be like me and leave it until the last moment to submit. Your role could quite easily close early if there's plenty of applications. Supporting information, I know you'll hear more from Cate about this shortly, but when it comes to completing your supporting information, make it clear. This is essentially your chance to show the hiring manager how you fit the requirements of the role. Definitely don't be afraid to sell yourself. If you think you're a good fit, you need to prove it. Prepare beforehand, read over the person specification again, make sure you understand the job description, and always provide examples. Make sure you use evidence with regard to how you meet that criteria. A spec might ask for you to have presentation skills. You need to list how you have used presentation skills, how you've delivered a presentation, and what the outcome of that presentation was. This is just an application checklist. Might be useful for any of you who are completing your applications. Quickly just run through this. So a thorough review of the advert, person specification and job description. Make sure you understand that fully before you make the application. Set time aside. As I said, keep an eye on closing dates. Don't leave it to the last minute to submit your application. Have a think about your motivations, why you want the role. This might be a role which is applicable to the degree course you've completed. You need to talk about that in your application. Really tell that hiring manager why you want that position. Work experience needs to be listed similar to the CV that James spoke about, your most recent to the oldest, and tweak any duties and responsibilities and meet that criteria of the position you're applying for. Support information shows how you meet the essential criteria and desirable criteria. As I just mentioned, you always need to provide examples with how you meet that criteria. Proofread before you submit, get somebody to have a read through before you submit it. Always check what you're doing before you click that submit button. And then finally, make sure you've noted down any closing dates, interview dates, if they are available. That was a whistle-stop tour from me, but I just wanted to kind of draw your attention again to further help and support available through NHS Jobs. As the thread of this presentation goes, please do use the contact information provided on the vacancy for any queries you might have, questions about particular roles. I've added a screenshot there of where you'll see that on NHS Jobs. It's usually situated underneath the green button where you press apply for this role. There's generally a phone number. There's always an email address. For any system support, when you're making your application, if there's any issues with the service, you need assistance with NHS Jobs. There is frequently asked questions through the system. There's a link on this slide to them. There's a YouTube channel with various tutorial videos that talks you through each stage of that application. And we also have user guides available that you can view or download. And finally, just a shameless plug from me, but if you can spare the time, volunteering could be a fantastic way for you to get some valuable experience to list on your applications. Volunteers are crucial to the NHS, and as you'll see there's over 300 different types of volunteering roles available. You can find those all on the NHS volunteering service, and again this link will be available on the slides when I share afterwards. I feel like I've rattled through that very quickly, but I think I'll pass back over to you, Miriam.
Jon, you did a fantastic job. Thank you so much. Really useful, vital information for our students. I'm now going to hand us back to, or over to rather, Cate Morgan. She is one of our senior clinical leads here within NHS England in the East of England, and she's going to be talking to us about personal statements. So over to you, Cate.
Thank you. And hopefully you've all seen that these great Future Ready webinars are available on the East of England Healthcare Learner Toolkit app. And this is just our pitch at this moment in time, just to remind you to tell your friends and colleagues to download the app, because you're going to have more webinars coming under that Future Ready banner, and they'll be there for you to review and look at again and again. So please spread the word. Next slide, please. So what I do want to talk to you about is the Student Hub. It's on our Healthcare Learner Toolkit app. It's there sitting under the career preparation tile, and it's really key student resource. It was developed by students for students with our regional and national teams, and I'm delighted to say that our East of England Student Council contributed to this Student Hub. What's great about the Student Hub, it's there to empower students and recently qualified nurses and midwives and nursing associates during a crucial phase of their career, but also there's been a recent addition for allied healthcare professionals. So throughout this next section of the personal statement, I'm actually focusing largely on an occupational therapist process through the Student Hub, so that you can see that it works across all of our professions. Next slide, please. So there are profession-specific pages tailored with support on our Student Hub. So you can go into student nursing midwifery, nursing associate, allied healthcare professionals, and then there's some really great student insights and career stories, just so that you understand that this is a squiggly career, and that's why that future ready little logo is so great, because we have squiggly careers. But what we want to do is get that personal statement right for your roles that you're looking to apply for. But if you would like to look on the Student Hub, then please do. And I'm just going to do a little deep dive into occupational therapy, and moving on to the next slide, please. So when you're writing a personal statement, it's crucial for healthcare applications that it's engaging, authentic, and it demonstrates your suitability for the role. And I think that everything Jon said was just great, and I'm really glad, because hopefully our presentations are just going to dovetail in so well. And this is where you should explain why you're suitable for the post. You will find it really useful to look at job description, as Jon said, and the personal spec and the performance standards throughout your application to ensure you're demonstrating your suitability for a post, and consider how your past experience, skills and knowledge are relevant to the requirements, and give examples, as Jon said very clearly. Next slide, please. So the structure is a bit like an academic essay. So please remember, you have got this. You know how to write a personal statement because you've been writing in this way throughout your academic pre-registration qualifications. So you usually need an opening paragraph, and that will usually be responding to the job description, and as Jon said, explaining your motivation, and then what draws you to it, whether it's caring for people or helping them to meet their needs, as perhaps it would do if you were in some healthcare roles where you are helping them to get back to their everyday lives. The body paragraphs are specific examples, as Jon said, how your placement experience has prepared you for practice, times when you've demonstrated professional values like compassion and respect and professional accountability, your understanding of the challenges and rewards of the role, and you can refer to relevant policy that informs practice in this role. So that might be things that you've done in your clinical area, say it's medication administration, how you've done that safely. Any relevant personal experiences that have shaped your career choice as well. It's good to know what motivated you. And then that closing paragraph, as you would in your assignment, would be connect your goals to the specific role, showing you've researched the position, understand what they have to offer. So next slide, please. So structuring your personal statement, when you get your personal specification, it's a bit like your marking criteria. And as Jon said, you perhaps don't have to have everything in there, but where it comes to essential, that will be on particularly in jobs where you're applying electronically. There will usually be a ticking to make sure that you have achieved all those essential criteria. Sometimes when you're writing a personal statement and perhaps you don't quite meet all those essential criteria, you might be working towards it, you might have those transferable skills, but it's being really clear how those skills transfer in your personal statement. So one of the easiest ways to check this is to either have the personal statement up on your screen and use post-it notes, or print it off and do post-it notes, but just writing down the things that you have had in your experience or your qualifications that will actually meet those criteria. And Jon suggested putting it in a Word document and doing it that way. But I think it's really treating this in the way that you've been trained to do your academic assignments, so that you've got evidence against each of those essential criteria. And then there are those desirable criteria. Again, it's great if you've got evidence against them, working towards them, all those transferable skills. Qualifications, experience, knowledge and skills are fairly standard for NHS job descriptions, and the words will be fairly similar across most of the roles that you might be applying for from a healthcare professional perspective. Next slide, please. Now, structure your personal statement around additional requirements and organisational values. These will be tailored depending on which organisation you're applying to, and you can see here I've got one from a occupational therapy application. But there's specific things around the trust values. So it's good if you can make sure that you've tailored those in, that you actually know that you ascribe to them. So they're really good words to pop in throughout your personal statement with those examples. And certainly in terms of blood and body fluids and regular contact with patients and those kind of things, that should be explicit throughout your statement. So just remembering those hazards to the role or specific requirements that they have. Next slide, please. So hopefully you've got some idea of the kind of experiences you've had. You've mapped it against that personal matched your personal statement against that essential and desirable criteria. But what does need to come across is your passion for the role. So what motivates you? And I have to say, Miriam and I had a talk about this, and I take myself off on a walk. And this is advice I give to students when I'm coaching them individually. You've really got to figure out why you want the job. And I think once you know why you want the job, everything else flows. So if you need to take yourself out on a walk and just get that why you want the job really clear, that's a really good starting point from your personal statement through to your right through to your interview, because it will come from here and you know why you want the job. Describing your placement experiences and how they've prepared you for delivering safe and effective care from that clinical preparation, and again including those examples of different care settings and patient groups you've worked with. Professional values, demonstrating your understanding of patient-centred care, dignity, respect, and the importance of building those therapeutic relationships with patients and families. And your professional development, show some commitment to continuous learning and staying current with evidence-based practice. And any career aspirations you've got are specific to the role or fits with your career goals. Next slide, please. Tailoring that supporting statement, please note the word limit. Some have 1,000 words, some have 300. It really just depends on the application, but tailor it to the healthcare setting and service. Make sure you're meeting those essential requirements clearly, or demonstrate how they're transferable in your application, and again with those desirable requirements. It's quite good to mirror the language. If they're using a particular language within the job description, it's often good to use the same language. So look out for those repeated words that keep coming up and how they describe the patient. Maybe it's a client, maybe it's family and clients, or however they phrase it. For each requirement, give a concrete example, as Jon said, and show that cultural fit so that you're demonstrating your understanding their values and approach to care. And then address any gaps honestly. If you've got gaps, as Jon said, you might not have to meet them all, but address them. But it's your enthusiasm for learning and development. Next slide, please. And finally, tips. Proofread it carefully, as Jon said. Get some feedback from colleagues you trust. Keep it relevant to your experience. Please be authentic. You know what? It's really good to make sure you read through your personal statement if you're invited to interview, so that you're telling the same story, so that they know it's authentically you. And also, follow those instructions, in all the sections. Make sure that you've got those deadlines, as Jon said. Next slide, please. So any questions? I think we've delivered on time. Thank you.
Thanks, Cate. So this section is for anybody to ask questions of myself, James, Cate, or Jon. I can't see any in the chat, but I will leave a few seconds of pause just in case anybody does want to ask any questions. I will take that as a no then. So all that leaves for me to do is to say thank you to my guest presenters, Jon Lee, Cate Morgan, and of course, James. Thank you so much for your contributions today. Thank you for attending and watching this recording. I will ask if you can please complete an evaluation. It's via Microsoft Forms. You can scan the QR code there to do that. And please do watch out for the rest of the Future Ready series. Next week, Cate and I will be focusing on interviewing for success. So really making sure you can nail that interview and get that job. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.